Okay, let's go. We are ready to start. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our very first live studio session for Heart-Led Landscapes. I'm going to just introduce what today is going to be a little bit about. Let me know if you can hear me. And we're going to move over to the work surface and paint in just a moment. I was twiddling with the stream settings, hoping to get a little bit clearer resolution, but it's just not consistent enough for me to improve the video quality and then still have a nice smooth video. So this is the best we're going to do, which is why we don't do tons of these live sessions. I want you to have good quality video that you can watch and rewatch, and that happens best when I record lessons in advance. But we get this great dynamic when we do a live broadcast. You get to ask questions, I get to answer them immediately or within that 20-second delay that we have here on YouTube. And you also get to talk to each other in the chat, which I see you doing, introducing yourselves, and you are a classroom. So you are talking to your fellow students who have enrolled in Heart-Led Landscapes, and only students who have enrolled in Heart-Led Landscapes. This is a private feed just for you guys. And basically, I'm pulling you all into my studio today, and I'm going to show you me using the content in the lessons. I don't teach stuff that I don't actually do. And as I built Heart-Led Landscapes, I got super excited about the content because not only did it help me to give you some tools that you can use to be more confident landscape artists and put more of your heart into your landscapes, but it helped me to really understand what I do and be more intentional about it. So often in art, and this is a reason why art instructors sometimes struggle to teach, is so often we're working alone in our studios, we're not articulating what we're doing, and so so we don't know how to explain it, and we stumble over words, and we maybe give you a piece of the puzzle, but we haven't always unpacked really everything that we do and why we do it. And so as I started to work on this course, and as I've been teaching on abstracting and loosening up your landscape paintings, I've been thinking more and more about, what makes a heart-led landscape? Why is it important to be thinking about putting self-expression into your landscape paintings? And it was really fun and exciting to put that into a course. The good news is, the stuff you've been doing up until now as you've painted landscape paintings, it's all stuff that you're going to use in your future paintings. Everything you've done up until now is going to make you a stronger painter. Even if you're new to painting, because your life experience, the places you've been, the things you've done, and the way you think about things, all of those things can make your paintings richer. And we forget that when we only focus on technical skills and maybe depicting a visually perfect scene. We're not about that here. We want to paint things that look like things, but we also want to put ourselves into them. And so that's what we're here to do. We do need to start with the foundation. So it is helpful to know that structure that makes a good painting, and to be able to identify it. And one way you can do that is by looking at other artists' work and, taking some of the things you've learned this week and, look at their work with an eye to that. What are the patterns of values in the composition in that scene? And where are the areas of greatest contrast, and why is my eye drawn so quickly to that area? It's great contrast. And so we look for those things in other people's work, and that makes our work stronger as well. Now, I haven't done... You have a sunset demonstration in the course, and what was I going to say about that? Sunset skies are a great place to practice value and explore value, because really there's a lot of times well, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of beautiful colors in the sky. I was going to say there's not a lot of color variation in skies, especially if you're working on a blue sky day with lots of little puffy clouds. That's what it looks like out of my window right now. And if it's an overcast day, often everything's gray, and you see the value patterns in those grays. But there's also this myriad of really subtle, beautiful colors. And so painting skies, I think, can be so fun if you're working to build your skills at depicting value. Working with a sky, especially a sky with a lot of drama, is a great way to do that. So I'm going to show you my reference photo today, and that means I need to share my screen because I don't have a printout of this picture. It's actually a photograph taken by a friend, and if you're following me on Instagram, you might have seen it. And so I don't have a copy for you. I have permission to paint it myself, but I didn't really ask him if you guys could all paint it. So what I would encourage you to do, and I know he would say yes, but anyhow, what I would encourage you to do is take some of your own sky photos, you know, anything that you can find with a lot of value variation in the clouds, and play with value studies with those. That's an assignment that you can do today. And that's what I'm going to start with. And I'm just going to share my screen so you can see that picture. There we go. There we go. Amazing sky. This is over the city of Chicago. And he said it was quite early in the morning, and I don't even know if a storm rolled through or if it had just gone through, but you can see that amazing path of dark shadow clouds and that big cloud formation, and the movement that you see there, the lines, the way they streak through the sky. It's really a powerful image and absolutely beautiful. And now we're going to go quickly back to my work surface and show you, ta-da, I've done 2 versions of this already, and I'm going to show them to you. And I didn't follow my rules because I don't believe in rules. I didn't do a value study on these. I went straight in and started painting. So this was the first version that I did. And I was working with these colors here. These are all tubes of paint made by Core. And Core recently, I'm an artist educator for them, which means I did some training so I could be able to inform you what the paints are like and how they work. And the binder that goes into them, which is their exclusive formula called Aquazol, and it's one of the things that makes their colors beautifully brilliant. And it also gives them, the paints, these thready, this movement. There's this thready push up into the colors that I think you can see there. And so they're a beautiful paint, and I do like using them. I'm not exclusive to any single brand. And so I was trying out different colors of Core, and I was using the same colors in my recent YouTube video, the Irish Hill Scene. I'll link it up in the description below the video once we wrap up here. And because I had some color left over in my little sushi plates here, I pulled it into this next painting. I did add in some blues, like so. And so I used blue as well. And I will... I can list the colors after we wrap up here. So then I did a second version, and this one actually, let's see if we can fit parts of them in side by side, because I want you to look at the contrast here and how the contrast, our eye goes to the patterns, the contrast between dark and light. So here we have a strong dark against a light. Here we have a strong dark against a light. Here we have these 3 spots are really strong. Your eye goes right to those. We also have strong contrast up in the corners, but it's not as strong. So we really do go straight to those areas of greatest contrast. And so I look for that, and I want to, with this second version, I was more intentional with how I place those contrasting values. But we're going to just switch right over to a sketchbook, and we're going to do a value study. So it's kind of backpedaling a little bit because I didn't do a value study to begin with, and I don't always, because sometimes I just want to start painting, and that first version tells me what I don't know. So I go in, let's make a box to put us in. So I often will paint a version just to see kind of where the holes in my information are. Then I might do a value study if I'm really struggling. So you don't always have to do your value study first thing. Now I do need to go to a darker valued color. I like to use Payne's Gray or Indigo. Indigo right now is my current preference for value studies. And I need to pop up on the screen. I haven't listed the colors. Really, I try to look for colors to mirror the image, to show what I see. And I try to squint at my reference photo so I can see the value patterns as well. And we really have this beautiful diagonal line coming through, and I love a diagonal, so I'm going to use the side of my brush to kind of get that in. And I'm not going to my darkest dark yet. We're going to just start with kind of that middle value. And there's kind of another pattern of darks here. Darker colors, and I'm not going to worry about the lower part of the reference photo. There was, I think I showed you, well, I'll explain it in a minute because we're going to do the whole painting here, or parts of, or as much of it as we can in one sitting. And really you're just looking over my shoulder as I incorporate this content we're going through in the course. And doing a value study gives you information, it gives you strategies for how to treat your reference photo. One thing I'm wanting to look for is a combination between soft and hard edges, as well as those dark and light values. Robin is here today, so she can take note of any questions that you have as I'm painting, because I'm not looking at the chat when I'm painting. I gotta use my brain for painting. And one other comment I want to add is just remember that in our Heart-Led Landscapes community at fearlessartist.net, you should have received an invitation to that when you enrolled in Heart-Led Landscapes. And if you haven't received that invitation, or don't, maybe it's ended up in, check your spam and then email Robin, info@angelafair.com. Okay, we're putting in those darkest darks now, and we're going to see how that changes the image. And I also didn't use my color evaluator. You know, I talk about using a value finder tool. However, I don't do that all the time either. I really like to exercise my ability to see the values with my eyes rather than always relying on tools. But if, you know, the value checker actually works really well for comparing painting to photograph. Okay, I'm liking that. Okay, so look at the composition here. We have, and I'm going to just switch my camera again so I can see what I'm pointing to on this screen. We have two diagonals actually. We have this one, which is going to be our secondary kind of supporting element, and then we have this strong, powerful cloud. And I get to decide how much I want to exaggerate or minimize the contrasts in my reference photo. I'm probably not going to get them exactly the way the reference photo shows me. I get to do kind of what feels right, depending on my mood and how I want to direct the scene. So I'm just going to put my paint back on my carousel here. And I like these little sushi plates for giving me the opportunity to sample a color before I put it in my full palette. And we're going to switch over to, yeah, so didn't those darks do a powerful, just make the whole painting change? I think that's what I really want to keep in mind as I'm painting, is that I don't want to cover up my whites, my lightest values. I need to keep some beautiful translucent light values to come forward against the darks and to create that contrast. And the other thing I need to recognize, and I think you can see it in my previous versions of the scene, is that we have warm and cool colors happening here. Down below we have a lot of grays and blues. Up above we have this beautiful turquoise, and then we have that hit of sunrise color, which is warm. And then these clouds are neutrals, stormy neutrals, but they have a lot of warmth in them. They have violet, they're not just a gray blue. Here that's kind of cool, and then we get some warmth moving through, so there's a little bit of interplay there. And then we have a pop of cool color, and then this actually does get a bit warm again. Anytime you're comparing violet to blue, here we have blue and violet side by side, the violet-y color is going to look warm. But if I have that violet color up here beside the orange, that violet is going to look cool. So it's really relative to what colors are beside it. And anywhere I want to have those kind of stormy dark values, I'm tending to lean a little bit neutral there. So a violet, a little bit of a murky violet, I guess, or a murky gray. And I'm watching for places to put those. And by using a limited palette, we're not using every color in our palette. I'm working with, let me try to remember what these are here. I've got a quinacridone violet. I've got a raw sienna. I don't think I'm going to touch. Yeah, I think most of my painting actually comes with these colors here. Sorry, I'm trying to back up and remember what I was doing. Over on this side, I have Indanthrone Blue. I have a ultramarine. No, rather, I have manganese and Indanthrone Blue. So this is a manganese. And the Indanthrone Blue, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I'm almost out of. So I might have to try to find it. Didn't realize it had disappeared off my palette. I've got this beautiful translucent orange, and then my pinky red here, which is, I believe, the quinacridone rose. Or quinacridone, yeah, I think so. Okay, so let's paint. And it doesn't really matter. I have a I have a beautiful pink, I have a blue which I can mix to make my violet, and I have a bit of an orangey color so that I can create some neutrals. The orange mixed with the blue gives me kind of this murky gray green. And I'm trying to move back and forth between my reference photo and my screen just to make sure you can see everything I can see. And I haven't touched paint to paper yet. So let's do that. Let's start with kind of our grayish, our big dominant cloud. Oh, I forgot one thing we're going to do before we start is we do need to think about the lower part of our painting. And what I did instead of painting those signs and buildings is I went a little more local for my landscape. Here you can see there's this beautiful strip of green, and I'll probably tear off all this stuff at the bottom because to keep that scene balanced, it's actually really nice to just stop right about there. And then we have the dominant part of the scene taken up with the sky. So today, what I've done to create my landscape is I've torn some masking tape in half, and it's got a uneven edge, and I can just use that to mask off some hills along the bottom. That hill's a little too pointy, I think, so I'm gonna use another piece of masking tape to kind of try to level it out. And then maybe a little bit more. And these torn masking tape bits are really fun to work with because it gives us this nice organic edge. I still feel like I could improve that. A nice organic edge that we can then fill in with color once our painting is dry. I'll just peel it away and then I'll add my color. Okay, now we're going to put that first cloud in. And what I did, I'm going to start by putting in kind of a gray. We've got our little puddle of palette dirt. We're going to add a little bit of orange to it. And if it gets too greenish looking, I can add a little bit of pink to it. And that gives me a nice gray to start with. And we're going to start with that strong diagonal again. And we're going to try to paint around the white clouds. And I'm using the side of my brush, and that gives me an organic edge. You can see the dry brush there. And it helps me fill a larger area as well. And I'm going to try to keep things mostly soft, a little bit of hard edges. And this is an experiment, and I think the thing about a statement sky is it's either going to work or it's not. And we need to recognize that I might have to paint this a bunch of times before I really get the statement I want to make. Okay, so this is a muddy neutral that was already in my palette with the violet and the blue mixed. And you can see what a lovely purpley gray that makes. Put some up here too. And I want to also keep those warm colors happening, so we're going to use a bit of an orangey pink here. One thing I've noticed is the longer I paint, the more sensitive my eye grows to subtle variations in color. I used to see, you know, in the spring when everything was brown and nothing had started growing yet, I used to see everything as brown. And I don't see brown anymore. Suddenly I started seeing violet. I started seeing rust and gold and all of those subtle neutrals that just were beautifully inspiring. And this kind of started to dry a bit. And so I have some edges there that I'm not going to want to keep. I might have to cover them with a darker value color in a little bit. Now over in the corner, here we have a patch of blue where we don't have the complicated dramatic storm clouds. We just have blue skies and clouds. So we're going to put that in, and then we're going to move back over here and put some blues in over here too. In the beginning stages of my painting, I almost always use the side of my brush instead of the point because I'm blocking in large areas of the scene, and I don't want to fuss. The sooner you start to tighten up on your painting, the harder it is. Well, it's really just almost impossible to get back to being loose once you've started to tighten up. So we want to use the side of the brush, work on blocking in those large masses of shape, and then gradually start to shrink down our focus to get really focused and narrow, and add those details in towards the end. So again, that second dark contrast happening in here. Also recognizing that down below where we're close to the horizon, these are the clouds that are the furthest away. We learned about that in our section on perspective. So those shapes might be a little bit smaller. I'm getting a lot of watermarks in here. Watermarks happen when our balance of water isn't a balance. It's we introduce fresh water into a drying wash, and that fresh water will push against the parts that are drying and create that edge. And it's beautiful in here to give us that contrast that we want to have. So I'm really happy it's happening. Often one way to prevent it if you're really struggling with it is to make sure you're not going in with your brush too wet. If your brush, when it touches the paper, releases a lot of pigment and liquid, it's going, and the paper's already starting to dry, it is going to create those watermarks. So going in with a neutral brush, a brush that is releasing paint, not sucking up color, but is not releasing so much that you're flooding the page. It's a little more controlled. That's just going to be a better way to get those darker values built up without creating watermarks and blooms. Now I haven't worked up in here, and I have a feeling my edges are starting to dry. The values get quite light up in this corner. So we're going to start by just wetting and softening this edge. We'll see how much it has dried and stuck to the page. Mostly it's softening out, so I didn't wait too long. But there is a little hint of an edge there, and I think I can work with that. Back to the reference photo. And I really could see painting this scene 100 times, because every time it's going to be different, just like the sky in life. It's endlessly fascinating. I always feel like you have to have a pretty cold heart to be unmoved by a beautiful sky. So let's take a look at our areas of contrast right now, pausing to reflect. And even though I don't have a strong, like near black, darkest dark, look at how the contrasts guide your eye through the scene. I really, even though they're not, again, strong and powerful, any white space, your eye goes right to those. This is a very strong area of contrast. So I think right now our eye goes here before it goes anywhere else. That means if we want this to be more dramatic, we need to build up our darks there. And so I'm going to grab some of this quinacridone rose, some of my manganese, and a tiny bit of my orange. I can't remember which orange that is. I think it's pyrrole orange. And that gives me a murky purple. Adding that hint of orange to it helped because the orange has a little yellow in it. And we're going to look for some areas to put our darkest darks. And so maybe that's one area here to contrast. And look at how here it's wetter, so it's soft. And up here it's a little drier, so we get a crisper edge, which then I have to decide, do I want to keep it or do I want to lose it? So we have our areas of greatest contrast, light and dark, light versus dark, but we also have contrast in hard versus soft. And it's important to recognize that because anywhere you leave a white space, the white of the paper showing through, there's often an edge there. Look at that strong little pop of white right there. I took a portrait drawing class and the instructor was talking about how they really don't like to draw teeth. And if you think about teeth in a portrait, they're going to be your area of greatest contrast. You've got your white teeth and the dark chasm of the mouth. This is really beautiful right here. Oh my goodness. And so it's an area of greatest contrast. And in a portrait, most of the time you want your viewer to be captivated by the eyes of the person in the portrait, not their teeth. And so you have to really handle that kind of trouble zone carefully. Beautiful things happening right in here. I'm going to put a dark contrast up in this area too. And again, be paying attention to how your eye moves into the painting differently. As soon as that dark brush stroke goes down, it's like zap, it's a magnet. So then I have to decide how magnetic I want it to be. I can make it a little bit paler. I can make it a little bit softer. So here's a little assignment for you. Take a look at your paintings today. And if you have a painting that doesn't have a strong focal point, or maybe you just want to see how focal points can be impacted and changed based on your areas of greatest contrast, take a dark color to one of your paintings, get a nice saturation of dark value color on your brush, and place it somewhere in the painting that isn't the focal point, and see how that changes, creating that new contrast changes your overall painting. You're going to be amazed. These little dark brush marks at the end of your painting, when you're putting in those details and those small shapes, they can change the entire course of your painting when you put in that pop of contrast. Whether that's a crisp edge, whether it's a dark versus light value color, or maybe it's a pop of a different color, a completely different color. So if I were to go in here with this rose color, it can change my entire painting because all of a sudden I have this color that stands out. And that's pretty amazing and pretty powerful. And it doesn't have to be a lot of brush strokes to change your focal point. Sometimes it only takes one. Now I'm getting to the stage where I almost feel like I'm fussing. There are things I could do that my reference photo is telling me. And we'll switch over and look at the reference photo one more time. here, but I just want to pause and take a look here. One thing that seems to be happening is I get these little, when I'm scrubbing with my brush, like my brush is swishing back and forth, sometimes it makes these little bubbles, and I think that's interesting. They disappear as the painting dries, but there's just these little dots of gathered color or something, water and air. With my brush right now, I'm actually touching in water, and that can create, again, blooms, which are going to add more depth to my clouds as well. And that one's really flowing nice and big. It's going to be scary. I'm going to take a look at your questions here, and we're going to take a look at the photo again. One thing I do is I don't always look at the photo the whole time. After a certain point, it's nice to kind of look at, it's really nice to kind of just stop and look at the painting and do what the painting needs, instead of always thinking about what we want to, what the photo's telling us. Switching back, there we go. Okay, amazing subtleties in this photograph. I could build up 50 tiny layers if I really wanted to zero in on the details, but it's amazing what you can get done in a single layer, just when you're paying attention to those values and creating those contrasts. And I'm not 100% sure how successful this version of the painting is going to be, and I guess we'll see a little bit more as it dries, but I like that strong contrast between that one single big cloud bank. I almost think it might be nice to do something in this area, but I'm not sure. Well, let's try a little bit of something. My paintings are always an experiment, figuring out what works and what doesn't. Takes sometimes multiple versions of the scene, multiple attempts, and a willingness to ruin the entire painting in that pursuit of trying to find the right thing to do and the elements that work for the painting. And I think sometimes, I don't know if you're in the place where maybe you're feeling like you can, maybe it's really hard for you to think about painting many versions of the same scene. And I think sometimes that is because in your head, you're not 100% sure you can paint something well more than once. You don't have that confidence in your ability yet. Just darkening the value here is going to make this white cloud pop forward. I think that's the right way to do it. So if you don't have that assurance that, oh, I can paint, you know, I'm getting better all the time, I'm going to be able to, if this version doesn't turn out, I'm going to be able to problem solve and do a better version. If you don't have that confidence, it can be really hard to think about tackling the same scene, doing it over and over again, with that idea that at some point you're going to, trusting that you're going to get to that place of, this is the one. And I believe in you. I know you can do it. So I hope you'll trust me and give it a try. This little area is actually too wet. I'm going to just blot a tiny bit. And blotting with that paper towel is going to give me some additional layers of light and dark values. And a little bit of value depth in here as well. So now we have light, medium, and dark happening in this area. We're probably getting low on time. I'm afraid to look at the clock because I'm enjoying this. And I pulled out my indigo because I'm not really sure where the indanthrone blue went. If you really were all shoehorned into my studio, you would be having a hard time not stepping on the paintings that are piled up on the floor that need to get put away, and the mass of objects that paintings and resources that I've been using as I've created this Heart-Led Landscapes course. I've just been working on this course for several weeks, months, and at least a month, and all my tools and resources have been piling up. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Partly because this area is getting to that kind of damp paper towel stage where the color doesn't want to flow very nicely, and partly because after a certain amount of time we start to lose objectivity, and it's really hard to analyze what's working and what isn't working if you've been staring at your painting for a while. I am going to remove the masking tape. Ordinarily I would wait till the painting has dried, but it's dry enough that I don't have to worry about color flowing into the scene. But I do need to tear very carefully so that I don't tear the paper. There we go. So now I have a nice little assortment of hills that I can paint. And but I'm not going to put them in yet because it's too damp down here. But I'll just put in a slash of green with maybe a spot of kind of a bluish green to be a bit of a shadow color. And then I'll look at my clouds again and build up those depths further should I wish to do that. I'm going to move over to your questions right now. I know there's been a few. And okay. Yeah, I have, sorry you're having a hard time hearing. It is, my microphone is closer to my computer than it is to my painting surface, and I should move back and forth. Okay. I'm just taking a look for your questions. Jenny, you said, yeah, I balk at the notion of painting something over and over again. The first one is always such an effort. It is. It's usually the first one is the hardest one. And the neat thing is the more you paint it, the more you get to know that scene and the more confident you become in your approach. And it just becomes easier to, a lot more of the decisions that you're making in those successive versions become more instinctive. And I can tell as I'm painting the sky that I still don't really know it well enough to abandon the reference photo completely and just paint it from my heart. Usually 5 or 6 paintings in, you get to that point where you don't need to look at a reference anymore. You're just painting for yourself. Focal point in my painting, that's a good question. The focal point in this scene really is that big dramatic cloud. And we can zero in as well. We can say, okay, it's that big dramatic diagonal cloud. And then within that cloud, the eye keeps going back to this one area. And then the other thing let's actually look over at the work surface again. Another thing you want to do is just look at how this dark kind of supports this long dark slash of color. Of dark value with that white contrast here. So we have this almost zigzag. Here we look here, our eye goes to here, it might pop up to this white area here, and then it comes back to rest here because we don't have any areas that are competing. If this area were to be too dark, let's see here, let's do it. This painting is a teaching tool, so we're gonna make it a teaching tool. We're gonna make it harder to, it doesn't have to be perfect, in other words. I'm grabbing my indigo again. This is indigo from Daniel Smith. It's the one I have in my palette. So now I have a strong dark here and a strong dark here. And the eye, we're not really sure which one to focus on. Yeah. So then the eye doesn't know where to go. And so it really helps to have this hierarchy of importance in your scene and recognize that we use our values and our shapes to support that. I'm actually going to just lift to lighten this, and that'll bring that hierarchy back to this strong dark up here. And when I go to paint my landscape, it's the same thing. I'm going to be thinking about still keeping the strongest area of contrast, up in this area so that our eye keeps going here. We have interesting things to look at all over the painting, but then sooner or later we want them to come back to the focal point and just look at that amazing dramatic cloud. Okay. I want to just answer a few of the questions I've been seeing in the group since we're all here, or many of us are here. And okay, so regarding the course, I really want you to use this course for you. That means go through it at your own pace. If you feel like this is what I really need to learn right now, and is any particular lesson that really feels like this is what you've been looking for, stay there. Don't feel like you have to keep pace with the class in order to get the most out of this class. You'll actually get a lot out of the community if you kind of just pause where you're most interested, and then share that work and ask questions and engage with the group and regarding that topic, and just build your body of knowledge that way. And do what works for you. I spent far too many years feeling guilty because I wasn't doing what all the artists said I should, whether it was actually doing a lot of preliminary work instead of just launching into the painting, or maybe it was not wanting to make color swatches. I never liked making color charts when I would buy a new paint color and see how it mixed with other colors. I just wanted to launch in and use it. And so I chose to do what worked for me. There was a question in the group earlier about, I'm not as loose a painter as Angela, and so is this really the right course for me? The goal of the course is to help you become your own favorite artist. So to give you peace with letting your heart out, because sometimes we really lean on just copying the reference photo because we don't trust that we have our own content to contribute, or we don't trust that little inner voice that says, oh, I want to add in this, or I want to, leave it, call it finished at this stage of the process instead of adding more details. So give yourself permission to do what works for you. As we learn to trust our own inner artist, you get to see your most authentic work come out. And that is what this is all about. I'm giving you tools you can use, and they're going in your toolbox, but you need to choose the right tools for the painting you want to do. And part of that is using your technical skills, intentionality, and part of that is paying attention to the painting and asking yourself, what does the painting need? This week we are working on value studies. We're thinking about perspective and how objects fit together in the landscape. All of these things that we're practicing this week, and there's a bunch of new lessons rolling out tomorrow actually to take you to that next step. If you're not ready, that is okay. I just thought, well, everyone's doing value studies. They're going to want to go to the actual painting. So we need to give you the lessons for that as well. So those are going to come out tomorrow. And there will be some bonus demonstrations in there as well that you can look at. With those bonus demonstrations, you do not need to copy the photo or the painting that I'm doing. I have provided reference photos, and I reiterate this in the course. You don't need to do everything I do. I prefer you to use your own photographs so that you add that authenticity of knowing your scene. And that, again, lets your heart out onto the paper, of having that confidence and that sentimental or emotional connection to place is going to make you a stronger painter. Carol says, do you ever worry about those sun is? I'm always told that and find it restricts me quite a bit. Mostly that the sun, we get visual cues as to where the light source is coming from in our reference photo. And so the direction of the shadows, even if you haven't thought about where the sun is coming from, if you're painting the shadows going the right direction, you're doing it right. So I don't always understand why I do something when I do it, but if I rely on my good observation skills, that really helps me to trust what I see, and then the interpretation comes from the heart. Yes. DSL Arts, as I call it, being an outlaw artist. Yeah, not having to follow the rules. We do what works for us. And the best artists do. They say, you know what? I know the rules say this, but I don't care. I'm going to do what's right for me. And I don't know why we think that makes us a bad artist, because the most memorable artists through the pages of history are the ones who broke the rules and let their own authentic selves out onto the paper. We see that time and time again. Elizabeth says, how do you handle yellow and blue in a sky without getting green? Sometimes there is green in the sky. Sometimes the yellow and the blue, they do connect and there's a bit of a greenish tinge there. But most of the time, if you really see a lot of yellow and blue, I'm trying to think here. There are times when you might need to paint one color like the yellow and then let it dry and then put the blue in so you don't get those runs. But a lot of the time you're going to see a lot of murky neutrals when you have both warm and cool colors in your sky. Then usually the shadow colors are a really murky neutral that comes from those warm and cools combining. Abel's Farms. Kathleen asks, do you always go back with another layer with skies? Not always. My preference is to not fuss, not have my skies look too stiff and painted. I want everything to flow. So often I will keep it simple and just do one layer. Of the two paintings that I've done of this scene before, one is a single layer and the other one is 2 layers. So I've done it both ways. Vivian's question, how do you correlate your gray values with your colors? How do I make my colors kind of match the values that I see? I think it's practice for one thing. You can use a value scale but I don't usually have the time to pause while I'm painting and check my values. So a lot of it is just getting to using that limited palette. So you're using a smaller amount of colors obsessively. I like to, these colors that I use today, I've been using all week. And so I get to know them and I know their qualities. I know that if I'm using raw sienna, it's never going to be like a black, like a 10 on the value scale. It might only get as dark as 5 or 6. And so I know that I need to adjust how much I dilute that color in order to get the value range that I want. So yeah, we do see it's so much of this, so much of like figuring out what values to do where. One thing is just trusting yourself. Don't rush in with your darks. Take your time, relax and breathe, and be really present in the painting. And recognize that you have some wiggle room. When we're talking about contrast here, I don't need to get I often try to simplify my painting down to light, medium, and dark. And say, okay, this area of the scene is a darkest dark, this area is a middle value, this is the lightest value, and we simplify it to that. I don't need to have the fullest range of values that I see in my reference picture. And and being aware of color quality, that yellows are never going to be, a 10 on the value scale. They're never going to be a near black. Reds are usually very darker than they feel like they should be. So I have to be careful with my reds, if I'm using a red at full strength, it's going to look black most of the time if you were to convert it to black and to grayscale. So that's a good thing to know. Just looking at a few more questions. I love to add pastel to watercolor once in a while. Have you ever tried that, Angela? No, I have not. I have pastels, and I actually think that would be a great way to add some texture. I think that would be fun. Yeah. Okay, I think we are pretty ready to wrap this up. I want to encourage you to post your work in the fearlessartist.net community. We don't have a ton of rules up there. We have our Heart-Led Artist, our group there, but you can post anywhere on the site that you want. And we really just encourage you to be there engaging. It doesn't need to be a perfect painting. I like to see what you're learning so I get an idea of your skill level, and that makes it easier for me to offer you guidance. I liked one of Carol Noel posted on our Facebook group recently. She said, she posted an article talking about how we don't start a sculpture with sandpaper. Like with sandpaper, you usually start, like if you have a big block of wood and you want to sculpt it into something, you're going to start with a chainsaw. You're going to be really, work to those big shapes first. Sandpaper comes at the very end, and and I liked her analogy, and she was talking about criticism being that way. If you're a brand new painter, I'm not going to zero in on, advanced artist things to advise you on. I want to be able to guide you where you're at. And that really helps me to be able to do it. It's easier for me to do when I've seen your artwork in the group. So feel free to post. If you really need a critique on something, I can't comment on every piece of artwork posted in our community. I just can't. But I love seeing your work. I'm in the group every weekday. And if you use the little hashtag and write critique at the end of your post, that helps me to know that this is something you've been working on that you really need help to find a direction in. And I can then look for those. And those will be my first choice for offering constructive criticism and coaching you in them. So hopefully that's helpful. The new lessons roll out tomorrow. I email you when new content becomes available, and we're also again in the community. So if you're not in the Fearless Artist community, you still will get emails when new content is added. And so much of what we're talking about today is about brush miles. I'm just going to say it again. I can't remember if I finished that sentence earlier. Brush miles, practice. When you are working your brush, when you are working your observation skills, it gets easier. They get stronger. It's lifting weights. It's lifting your creative weights, your technical skills. And I don't expect you to lift a 100-pound weight the first time you weightlift. You're gonna, start really small. And we do that here too. And then we get better and we refine our technique. And we see that we see more subtleties in value. We see more options, more creative options the longer that we paint. And all of those things just gradually build on each other. So we load up that toolbox with all of these things, and the tools become more refined the longer we paint. So I hope that encourages you. I fully believe, and I've been painting, I've taught thousands of students for many years, and I've seen it time and time again. The students who are actively painting are the ones who are learning. If you love it enough to keep doing it, you will grow. You will get those skills that you're yearning to have right now. I'm assured of it. I've seen it in my own life, and I see it in my students over and over again, and that is you. So I'm encouraging, I just want to encourage you again, when you're struggling with the painting, go back to your value study, paint a value study again, analyze the scene again, and then relax from it too. You don't feel like you're obligated to follow your value study exactly if the painting is going in a new direction. Always let your instincts lead, and then let your technical skills support those good instincts. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So we're going to close it off right there. Have a great day. Enjoy your painting, and I'll see you in the community at fearlessartist.net. And in our next live broadcast, which will be next Monday, same time, same place. Hopefully the studio will be slightly cleaner by then if I can get myself in gear. And have a great day. And now I have to find my off button. There it is. Okay, bye for now.